Greetings all. Ever since CitizenCon, I've been wanting to do a video on these ships, but I wanted to wait until after the Q&A in order to get some clarifications about some of the questions surrounding it. Without further ado, let's proceed. First off, let's get some common elements of all three variants out of the way and some common concerns. The component set for the Zeus was different. It was set to the new engineering gameplay standard, and other ships are going to be getting a balance repass on that, so I don't know how much we can draw conclusions from comparing it to alternatives to the Zeus, because the components for those, including the shields and the radars and all that, are going to change, most likely. Also, the seats behind the pilot have been clarified to be a gunner and a co-pilot. The gunner will control the turret that is common to all three variants. The co-pilot will control certain functions that is going to be dependent on which variant the co-pilot is in. The Zeus Mk II is intended to be smaller and slower than the Spirit elsewhere in the Q&A. They also mentioned that it would be less agile, and that's a problem for the MR, but more on that in a minute. It is also confirmed that it will have a small docking collar, and whether it can use small jump points or not, or really any ship can use small jump points or not, is apparently completely up in the air now. The design has evolved significantly, quote unquote, since it was first discussed, and we can expect more info as we get closer to 4.0. Let's talk about the MR, the Bounty Hunter variant of the Zeus. It does get an additional remote turret for a total of 2. Has the quantum dampener and an EMP, and it gets a little cargo space and some prisoner pods, much like the Cutlass Blue. So here's what I think are the number one things we need to clarify regarding the MR and it performing its role as a bounty hunter. Speed and how you use the EWAR and its firepower. So regarding speed, the only thing that was mentioned regarding the entire series was that the Zeus was intended to be slower and less maneuverable than the Spirit, particularly the C1. I've included the A1 here on the slide as a stand-in for that, but as you can see, that would leave it rather slow, especially when you compare it to other ships that have either a QED or a dampener, the Mantis, Antares, and Cutlass Blue. Those ships all at least can have a top speed of 1300. And the reason I'm somewhat hopeful that the MR will get somewhat of a bump is that the Antares is a little faster than the Scorpius, and the Blue is a lot faster than its sister ships, the Black and the Red. So I have no information to say that it will get a speed bump. I'm simply speculating that it might. And if it doesn't, I think that will weigh in a lot on whether people will want this ship or not. Moving on to the EWAR, or the electronic warfare, they did say that unlike the Antares, and we all remember what the problem with the Antares was, you had a guy in the back whose only job was to hit the EWAR button. That's boring, and people didn't like that ship as a result. They seem to have heard that, because they made sure to state that both of the co-pilot and the gunner seats behind the pilot will have something to do. They're each going to get a turret. They're also trying to work it such that every station can use the EWAR, both the QD and the EMP. I don't know how they're going to make that work for the pilot. The pilot, generally, when they're using something like an EMP, has to set a fire group to it. And if you have both of them there, I'm not really sure how that goes. Maybe they'll set up a keybind for the QD. I don't know. But that seems a little clunky to me. They did say that they would do something different if it was a problem. I think at the very least, stations in the back will be able to operate them as well as have guns to fire. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the MR. And now for the CL. Is it going to be the new king of medium hauling? It certainly has the SEU capacity to give that a run. 128 SEU of cargo, gets a rear tractor beam. Let's find out. So here I've done some comparables to what might be considered competition for the CL. And when it comes to cargo hauling, it's really kind of simple, isn't it? How much SEU can it hold? What vehicles can I transport with it? And does it have the speed to get me out of trouble or lift me off of a thick atmosphere quickly when I'm doing trading? I've also included the Spirit, and I put it that way because I really don't see the Spirit as direct competition. It really isn't priced the same. I think the Spirit came in with a standard price of 110 and a war bond of 100, and which is exactly where, say, the Cutlass Black and the Freelancer sit at. And I think that's where the C1's supposed to sit. This thing has a standard price of 150. So this is meant to be on a higher end. That's similar to the price of the Freelancer Max. That's what I think its real competition is. Probably the Taurus, the Max, and the Mercury Star Runner. The Star Runner holds a little less and is a fuel hog, but it can get the hell out of there really quickly. And I love trading with it for that exact purpose. I want to be able to get where I need to go quick, get out of trouble quick. The Taurus is a more expensive ship at 190. Just over 3.2 million in game. It's got far more capacity at 174 versus 128. A little of that shielded. It does have that crappy lift versus the ramp, which I always find superior for doing whatever I'm doing with the ship. But all in all, I think the Taurus is just a superior hauler, especially because it gets a tractor beam turret. And having gotten in the turret and looked back at my cargo hold in the Taurus, it seems I have clear line of sight all the way in the back. I am not so certain about that regarding the CL. To further emphasize that point, I did a little box here showing the tractor beam. And I don't know about you, but given how deep the cargo hold goes, I don't think it can put boxes all the way in the back. Now we're on to the ES, which is the exploration version of the Zeus. It does get a larger hydrogen tank and radar versus its siblings for that purpose, but really you're not going to get this ship unless you're looking to get into the exploration game loop that hopefully we will be getting sometime soon, quote unquote. Here is the ES versus some of its alternatives, roughly in the same ballpark. The most obvious comparison to draw is between it and the DUR. Same size class, similar price point, similar SEU capacity, similar function. I know the ES gets a large radar, however, again, there'll be a balance pass on all the components. All these ships may get large radars by the time it's over, so I'm not really going to count that against it. However, what I will count against it is the cargo hold on the DUR is terrible. It's hard to fit any reasonable vehicles in there. It's too narrow. It basically sucks. The ES looks like it has a much better ramp and entrance to its cargo hold, plus it's wider instead of this long, narrow thing. And they said at CitizenCon that it would be able to take a Cyclone, at the very least. So there's that. I think there's zero reason to get a DUR over an ES. Zero at all. As far as the other two go, those are much more expensive. They're larger ships. They also have some dedicated scanning stations of a sort. The 400i gets its hollow table. The Constellation Aquila has that scanning turret. And while we're not entirely sure about the hollow table, CIG did say that dedicated scanning stations would provide a bonus, or at least they're planning on it, providing a bonus to scanning. So should these ships get large radars, they should have an edge in scanning, or at least the Aquila will. One last note about these vehicles are the cargo holds. At least the 400i and the Aquila, they both have lifts instead of ramps, which I find to be inferior and potentially problematic when loading and offloading and transporting vehicles, or stray things that don't exactly fit on the cargo grid. The Aquila is at least notable that it holds a lot more. You can bring an Ursa, so that's great, and none of the other ships we're talking about right now can, but it's still a lift. And if you're out in the black, I want something reliable, and a ramp's pretty reliable. So here's the interior. The crew habitation is supposed to have 3 suit lockers. The other thing is the co-pilot seat. This kind of brings up a bone of contention I have. CIG mentioned roles for the other 2 variants, co-pilot seats. One got a tractor beam to use, and the other one got a turret and some EWAR to play with. Co-pilot here seems to do nothing but twiddle their thumbs and maybe do some engineering. And I don't think that's a mistake. You would think for an exploration ship, there would be thought of maybe putting a dedicated scanning station in this ship, and the co-pilot seat would seem the logical place to put one. Not including it here means that they either didn't think about it or intentionally didn't put it there in order to, as some kind of balance pass type thing, versus say it's larger cousins, the 400i and the Aquila. But I am holding out just a little hope that maybe they'll rethink that. And we've reached the end of the video. So thank you for coming on this journey with me. I've been slightly obsessed thinking about things to do with these ships. But please comment below if you agree, disagree, or just have thoughts in general. Thanks for watching. Take care.